New Jersey and the race for president, next on Carpe Diem.
Carpe Diem is funded in part by The Record and the Herald News.
The presidential campaign has already begun as candidates are raising money and trying to build support in states with early primaries. Hi, I'm Bill Berlin, your host for Carpe Diem. Just what will the 2008 election mean to New Jersey? Joining me to talk about this and other issues are Dr. Michael Rickards, Executive Director of the Hall Institute for Public Policy, Richard Lee, Communications Director, also with the Hall Institute, and David Schmiel, Editor of the New Jersey Monthly Magazine. Got to welcome you guys here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Each in your own way is dealing with issues at this point. Mike, you're concerned about the public letting you know at the Hall Institute what's on their minds.
Well, we think it's important at this stage, since the entire process has been moved up dramatically, that we give the candidates an idea of what the concerns are of the people of New Jersey, so we don't become overwhelmed by California and New York that are going to have their primary on the same day, and that we just don't end up also being, as New Jersey has so often been, a cash cow for the candidates. And so we're going to 3 different sites across the state asking people, what really is the great agenda for you? And do you think you want us to relay to the candidates as they begin this long process?
Rich, in terms of going to these sites, what's actually going to happen at these sites?
Well, we've been doing a number of things, and we're purposely doing different types of forums to get different types of input. We're doing a couple of panel discussions at colleges where a typical panel will include some political science professors, some journalists who've been covering politics, and usually political leaders from each party in that area. And Michael is going to moderate, those sessions. We're also, in partnership with Monmouth University, we'll be doing some polling. We're probably going to do a focus group. And Michael has also started something new for him, a blog site where people can, write back and forth with their comments on the presidential race. And as Michael said, from all this information that we gather, we're going to see what the priorities and issues are for New Jerseyans and draft an open letter to the candidates and to their campaigns.
This will be an open letter. It'll also be on your website.
Yes, it will be.
Which will be up on the monitor fairly soon, hallnj.org. Right?
That's correct. And actually, there's a special icon on our website, NJ 2008, which will take you right to our section on the presidential race.
David, you and your magazine are going to be dealing with issues too, maybe from a different perspective, but it's going to be important before the election.
Absolutely. I think these guys are lucky enough to have a forum where they can do this on a daily basis. For our purposes, because of our lead time, we're always trying to sort of guess where we think we need to go and the issues that relate to people. So what we've done is we've sort of taken a look at what's going on in the state. And we created a monthly series called New Jersey and How It Got That Way. So we've dealt with everything from ethics to home rule to any number of issues, and trying to tackle it and make it so that people can understand exactly what's going on. And that's where I think it also plays into the national picture. How do we relate?
Mm-hmm. But some of the issues you'll be looking at, all 3 of you, such as ethics, let's say, these are New Jersey issues. They're not going to apply very much to a presidential race. Is that fair to say?
Theoretically.
Theoretically?
I think all people are interested in ethics, especially with what's gone on politically, both on the state and national level. I think people want leaders, who are ethical.
Well, yeah, and I think, at a time like this where it seems there's so much, whether it's statewide or whether it's on a national level, where people are not comfortable with things that are going on. Whether it's the war, whether it's the economy, whether it is the political partisanship that's going on. Certainly, we're not immune to it, but it seems as though in the greater scheme, in the greater frame, I think we need to look at it on a national level and on a state level.
Mike, what are the consequences or implications of moving the primary up to February 5th?
Well, I think it has a couple of consequences. One is it certainly makes the New Jersey primary more important than it was before. I think secondly of all, it means nationally all of this movement earlier and earlier places a greater emphasis upon the importance of having an organization in place and having a great deal of money to spend in a relatively short period of time. I think the age of the dark horse candidates is pretty much over. I hear a lot of people saying, well, I'm not going to emerge until everybody knocks each other out in October. Well, those days are gone. It's a whole different ball game. And you really have to start early, run fast.
The shame of it, though, is that Michael's absolutely right, but it's also the issue where you can be a front runner and have a misstep and you're dead. That's the end of it. You know, Howard Dean clearly is the poster boy for that, and that's the real shame of it. You know, now you get some people in who are viable candidates who don't have the biggest war chest, and when this process starts sooner, they're going to be out sooner if they can't get any traction. And it's unfortunate because we don't have candidates who are going to be in it for the long haul per se, because there's not going to be anybody to be a watchdog for them.
Mm-hmm. There's also some risk for this in terms of fairness to the voters. We might be choosing nominees, let's say, 8 or 9 months before the general election. A lot can happen during that period. You know, we might be choosing the wrong person.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, the person will have been chosen, and then they're going to go into a safety mode where they're not going to say anything. They're not going to have any new initiatives because they don't have to. It's been decided, so early that we're just going to get, more plastic candidates.
Mm.
In late 1959, a man named Jack Kennedy from Massachusetts was
I've heard of him.
running for the presidency, and somebody asked him just before the year turned to 1960, why do you want to be president of the United States? And he said, because I want to lay before my generation the great unfinished business of our time. And I think really that's what it seems to me is critical, to lay before the American people the great unfinished business of our time. And we certainly know there's an awful lot of it.
In terms of New Jersey and New Jersey issues, what is the unfinished business? It's a pretty broad question, I realize.
Well, that's what we're trying to
Yeah,
ascertain.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're going on the road, not for us to be telling 8 million New Jerseyans what it is, but also to be listening to what they have to say. I think a foremost issue is the war in Iraq. New Jerseyans are not too different from the American people. They may even be more alienated from the war in Iraq than even the American people. I think the issue of medical coverage is critical because our demographics are very similar to national demographics. Immigration is an issue in New Jersey. Education and education costs are important. I think some sense of economic security and stability is certainly important. But how they fall out, how the people of New Jersey decide what are important, the issue of environment may be important. That, I think, is really why we're on the road. We want to say to people, tell us, you tell us. Because we don't want to talk about personalities. We did that, we've done that in the past. That hasn't really gotten us very far.
Isn't it possible when you go on the road and you have audiences and people show up for these things that you're going to get a pretty skewed response?
You may, and you may especially get it when the places you're going to be at are college campuses. We recognize that, but we think that with the poll and with people communicating directly to our website will give us a pretty broad sense, just as we did in the virtual debate that we had for the Senate. We got answers that we hadn't expected.
Talk
from
about the
people.
virtual debate. You were very involved in
Yeah,
that.
the virtual debate was something that we did last fall for New Jersey's Senate campaign, and we decided pretty early on to do something a little different to really force the candidates to focus on the issues, which, as you know, in past elections, they've degenerated into a series of personal attacks, negative campaigning. So we ran it on our website, similar to an actual debate, where the candidates had an opportunity to make an opening statement, where it was similar to an op-ed piece, a 1,000-word essay. And then we started on 4th of July, and every other week we posed a different question to the candidates. They responded. They had the opportunity to rebut each other. It was interactive. People who went to our website had the opportunity to suggest questions and topics. And we were very pleased with the way it worked, because we think we did get them to talk about the issues, which was something that people did not get if they were reading the newspapers or watching the television coverage.
How many hits did you get?
We had about 9,000 people participated in it, and as the election got closer, we tracked it week by week, and it really grew in the last 2 or 3 weeks right before the election. So it's kind of building on that we decided to look at what can we do with the presidential race. We couldn't take the virtual debate and just transpose it to the presidential race. So we came up with this idea of these different forums, which we think will work. As Michael said, will identify the issues and concerns of people from New Jersey and get them to the campaigns. I think the virtual debate also was something that the candidates or the campaigns were looking for. I mean, a lot of people say candidates these days don't want to talk about the issues, but they were very receptive to what we were doing, and hopefully the national candidates will be just as receptive.
I think the issues are hugely important, clearly, and when wonks like us get to it, and wonks like the candidates and their staff certainly want it. At least they claim that they want to get issue related. All of that is hugely important, and all of that can't be minimized. That said, I think a big part of the problem here is that New Jersey has been marginalized by Washington for quite some time. I think Republican administrations look at it as a democratic state that is not going to waver. As a result, we lag behind in funding from them. I also think then with Democratic administrations, they took a look at us and know that they'll always have us in our back pocket and tend to take us for granted. They know we're a cash cow, as Michael said before, continue to donate, continue to support. But I still think that we run that risk of saying, unless we start making more of a difference, if we matter as a state, then we have to stand up and try to get some of that federal money, especially in New Jersey, where, frankly, I think people trying to pay their way in New Jersey is the greatest issue. Not to minimize all the other issues, but I think if we don't find a way to keep our residents here, and they seem to be leaving in greater numbers every year, if we don't find a way to keep them here, that's where we have a real problem with the federal government.
I want to get back to that in a moment, but following up on that, what's the goal? You sort of intimated what the goal is of your coverage. I want to be a little more specific. Is it your readership? Is it people in office? Is it movers and shakers? Is it all those people?
The short answer is yes, and I think the real answer is that we can talk all we want about activism and what's going on with all these issues today. The fact of the matter is that in a state where all we talk about is education, how education, school board elections, the voter turnout is about 11%, 11 to 14%. So for all these things that matter allegedly so much in our grassroots level, for something that takes on a more grandiose notion of the presidential election, I think we have to try to bring these issues home, and we have to let people know exactly what is not coming our way. And when we rank 47th or 48th in federal spending, we have a real problem.
In a lot of presidential elections and gubernatorial elections, you might get a sense, I guess, from polling about what the people want. When McGreevey ran a number of years ago, it was insurance. What about what people need?
I think it's pocketbook issues. It's the war obviously is the overriding issue, but I think for New Jerseyans, it's the economy. It's keeping them in the state, as David said. What really affects New Jerseyans is those folks who sit down at the dining room table, try to figure out how to make ends meet each week. So I think what resonates with them are taxes, the economy, even healthcare and education as they impact their ability to.
I think also it's going to be an election in which the issues are going to be refracted through the notion of how candidates handle themselves, especially over a long period of time. How do you handle when these issues come forward? Is some candidate going to come up with a brilliant solution to the particular problem that people have been wrestling with, whatever the issue is? I don't think that's going to happen. I think what will happen is that we will get a chance to watch how they think in a variety of settings over a long period of time. We are looking at their judgment, their wisdom, what the Romans used to call gravitas. Are they up to the job? And I think that's what public policy is also important. It isn't the quest for the golden solution. It's the question of how are these people, do they exercise the type of judgment that you say, I feel comfortable with that person sitting in the White House?
In an age of television and an incredible amount of television advertising, is it easy for the public to evaluate gravitas?
I think so. I think that it certainly can get a feel for the person's personality. What exactly he or she is going to be like under tremendous stress, you'll never know. But I think that we saw candidates self-destruct. We saw Muskie when that happened with him. We saw it with Dukakis when he couldn't figure out what to do. Somebody came in and raped his wife, and he sat in front of the American people and said that. We saw that with John Dean, who for some reason showed us that he had something missing. I think that that really is an important issue, because the bottom line really is what do you know, and how well effectively can you use it? And if we probably should be looking at those issues as they deal with the questions.
I agree with you theoretically, but I disagree that we get a better feel for who these people are. I don't think we understand who these people are because they're so controlled in their media messages and their media opportunities, and trot the kids out at the right time and trot the wife out at the right time, and here she is baking, or here she is reading a book to kids. I think we get these very sculpted messages, right down to the 1984 message that was, that a guy from the agency that dealt with Barack Obama's agency has copped to. So I think that we don't get to know who any of these people are because they don't want us to know who they are.
Too much packaging?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and listen, packaging has been going on for generations. We certainly know that. But I think with so many availabilities, you now get to craft the image for the MTV crowd, then you get to craft it for the CNN crowd, then you get to craft it for the IMAS crowd, and you do it that way, and I think that we lose a whole lot less of who these people really are.
In the 2000 campaign for President Gore Bush, did we know who Bush was?
I think we had a pretty good idea who he was, but maybe just picking up on what David said, I think we have the ability to find out more about the candidates, more so than we ever had in history. But I think your average American, your average New Jerseyan is just going to see the prepackaged stuff, so that maybe it's incumbent on the public to get more involved, to do some more research, to maybe watch some of the talk shows that we watch and get behind the scenes, which whether or not it's going to happen, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think that is going to happen because they have a couple of jobs trying to make ends meet. They're trying to help their kids do their homework. They're trying to do what they have to do in their own lives. And frankly, I think when it comes down to it, they're not terribly interested. It's a sad thing to say, but I do think that if people saw who candidates really are, they might get more interested.
But in a sense, doesn't the longer campaign, again, let's say the result of the primaries is we know who's going to be running in March, say, in a sense, doesn't that longer campaign give us more of an opportunity to get to know the candidates?
If they provided greater access and if they provided us with the ability to do it. Instead, what it does is it gives us a greater opportunity to hear what the prepackaged image is that they've run through the overnight polls and everything else. And I think, again, the overnight, if we could find a way to say, okay, fine, work your overnight poll, work your message, but now tell us what you really think. That's, it's all about being electable, certainly, but I think if people actually let their guard down and showed us who they were, they might even be more electable.
Well, we frequently say the issues are not important, but we've just come through a congressional campaign where issues sure were important. They resulted in the turnover of the two houses of Congress, and people were very clear as to why they wanted a change. It wasn't simply, well, they had listened to what was the package message. They were very clear sense of discontents that were expressed in that election. If people choose not to exercise their franchise, then they have nobody to blame but themselves. And because politics is going to belong to people who care enough to be informed and to vote. And when 50% of the people in this country don't vote in a presidential race, I think they have nobody to blame really but themselves.
You're absolutely right, and And it's that, as you say, we now have a political system that gets us, frankly, what we deserve. And we don't have somebody who can stand up there and say, when I was in college, I smoked pot. When I was in college, I protested Vietnam. We have all these guys who have to equivocate about what it is they did. And I'm sorry, if somebody at 19 years old was so cynical knowing that he wanted to have a political career that he wouldn't be caught dead with a picket when it was something he truly felt, then I don't want him to be my president anyway.
Right, right.
And so we are now creating a cast of characters that I think we've asked for.
In terms of, we only have actually about 3 minutes left. Getting back to the issues in respect to that, you mentioned a sort of a group of issues or a wide variety of issues. One issue you didn't bring up is Homeland Security. And it seems to me that could be very close to the top of the list in terms of the security of our ports and the security of our chemical factories. That's been in the news lately. How do we deal with that?
I think in New Jersey that is going to be an important issue. And I think that does come under the question of gravitas. Is this person tough enough to deal with what's going to be a long twilight struggle of people who are really outside of national borders? And are we going to be able to deal with them in a state like this? It's terribly vulnerable. If 9/11 did anything, it certainly sensitized the New York, New Jersey metropolitan area to the Homeland Security question.
David, is this one of the issues you might be covering?
Absolutely, and it's also something I think we're absolutely sensitized to it, but we've become desensitized by by hearing that Wyoming is getting more money per capita than we are. And here we are essentially, on the front lines of this battle for Homeland Security. So I think, again, the issue is Homeland Security. The issue around it is the politics of Homeland Security. And that's where people start getting desensitized by saying, this is hugely important. I think about it every day I take the subway, every day I take the ferry, every day I'm on the highway. But then where is the money coming from? Is it going to help us? And what is our future?
And that brings up the question, in a sense, that we began with. How dependent is our state government on the federal government in terms of grants or assistance or leadership? Homeland Security, as you say, is a really good example of that.
Well, I think we are terribly dependent on the federal government, but we also are the wealthiest state in the union. So maybe we ought to take a look at how we spend our own resources and reallocate them to what our priorities are, rather than to be spending the resources as we have in the past.
But at the moment, as I understand it, 22%, I think, of our state budget comes from the federal government. Is that an accurate figure, I think?
We are very low in terms of what we get back from the federal government, but part of it is low because we have high per capita income. Secondly of all, our elected representatives are not very effective in bringing home the bacon. Look at New Mexico, look at West Virginia, look at Alaska. So it's not just simply the federal government is ignoring us, it's the fact that we don't have the type of people with clout in place, and that also the government doesn't have to give us as much in terms of equalizing as they do to some of the poorer states, especially in the South.
But I think we're really a tale of at least two states. And yes, we have this astonishing amount of wealth, whether it's Wall Street, whether it's whatever. We have these people who have enormous amounts of wealth. We also have people who it's where they're living in staggering poverty. And I think the middle class is starting to get marginalized more and more for the things that they're having, the tax burden that they have to manage or try to manage, and all the other costs of living that are going up. You get a 3% cost of living raise for your at your job, and yet your personal budget is going up, exponentially when you talk about fuel and heating oil and things like that. And so I think it's a real tipping point here for the state, because we do have so much money and we do have so few people who believe that they're going to be able to get over the hump and really make more money.
And we have a state budget that's chronically ill.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, we spent a year on tax reform, and we've seen that it's yielded very little. The Constitution guarantees to all the states a Republican, small r, form of government. It doesn't guarantee them a wise government.
That's a good point. Again, in terms of federal funding, it seems to me that there are some issues that have directly affected many of us. Child care issues, for example. Head Start funding, as I understand it, has either been flat or cut. Aid, let's say, to hospitals via Medicare. A lot of our hospitals are really in bad shape at the moment. So it seems to me these might be some of the issues that are important, but I'm not really sure they're going to come up. You know?
I don't think it'll be those specific issues. I think it's just a general sense that, there are this large segment of the New Jersey population, whether they be near the poverty level or even like the middle class, which is, just having, lives from paycheck to paycheck, and those are the issues that are going to be important to them.
Right,
Yeah.
and since kids don't vote, and since the parents of kids who need Head Start programs and other programs like that are not voting, then that's why we're not going to see a whole lot of attention paid to those issues.
We got a very little time left. I just want in the control room if you could put up the website for Hall Institute again, www.hallnj.org. Quickly, we only have a minute left as it turns out. Let's get back to the politics for a moment. Who's going to do well in New Jersey? Who won't do well? Hillary is behind in the polls at this point. Giuliani is ahead in the polls. Any thoughts?
I think Giuliani's ahead in the polls here because we know him. I think he's going to lag in the polls across the country because all of a sudden they're going to find out about the wives, about the other issues and everything else. So we know who he is. And maybe also we know who Hillary is, and that's why her numbers aren't as strong.
Who else might play well in the state? As we're speaking now, John Edwards' wife has been diagnosed with a recurrence of cancer. So it might even be unclear how far his campaign is going to go. But he's an attractive candidate.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised to see Obama do well in the state. There's a very strong grassroots effort behind him. And not only grassroots, you're starting to see some people who have names in politics who are, big in fundraising and that are getting involved with the campaign. So I think, he kind of brings that sense of a new leader, like somebody who's fresh, who hasn't been as involved, before. And I think that appeals to a number of people, given the current political climate.
We're out of time, guys. I want to thank you for enlightening us. Hopefully you'll come back. There are many months before the campaign, before the end of that campaign. And if you'd like more information about this or any other Carpe Diem program, you could write to us at the email address on your screen, carpediem@mail.montclair.edu. Or you can give us a call at 973-655-5158. For Carpe Diem, I'm Bill Berlin, and thanks for watching.